At first glance, Lisa and Jason's life seemed flawless: 2 children, a beautiful home, and a picture-perfect marriage. But as their daughter's birthday party draws near, Lisa begins noticing small, strange things about her husband's behavior. Secretive phone calls, unexplained absences, and a cold distance she can't ignore. When she overhears a conversation between her husband and the nanny, a dark secret emerges, shattering everything she thought she knew. What happens when the truth comes to light at the worst possible moment, on the day meant to celebrate her daughter's joy? Before we continue, friends, I kindly ask you to subscribe to my channel. It only takes a second for you, but for me, it's an extra motivation to keep creating videos. I'd also really appreciate a comment. Thank you for your support, and now let's continue with the story. Lisa stood by the kitchen window, watching as the last of the decorations were hung outside the house. The vibrant streamers fluttered in the breeze, and the sounds of laughter and excitement drifted from the backyard. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden light over their quiet suburban neighborhood. It was supposed to be a perfect day, a celebration of their little girl, Sarah's 6th birthday. Lisa had worked tirelessly to make everything just right. Balloons, cake, gifts, even the little games and activities that Sarah loved so much. But beneath the surface of the party preparations, Lisa felt a growing unease. The perfect picture of her life seemed to be unraveling, slowly but surely, without her even knowing why. The house was bustling with guests, friends, family, neighbors, all gathered in the warm glow of celebration. Lisa should have been basking in the joy of her daughter's happiness, but the weight of something unspoken hung heavily in the air. Her husband, Jason, had been distant lately. It wasn't that he was outright cruel or dismissive. No, it was more subtle than that. He seemed absent. Even when he was there, his mind was elsewhere. He smiled at the children, laughed at the right moments, but Lisa could see it. There was a coldness in his eyes, a distance that hadn't been there before. She shook the thought from her mind. Tonight wasn't about her marriage, it was about Sarah. But as she moved through the crowd, greeting friends and making sure everyone had a drink, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. Jason was nowhere to be found. Lisa's eyes scanned the crowd again. He wasn't by the grill, where the men usually hung out, nor was he sitting with the other parents, laughing over small talk. The fact that he wasn't anywhere obvious made her heart tighten in her chest. She'd noticed his behavior had been off for weeks, but this felt different. There was something in the air tonight that made her skin crawl. It wasn't just the strange distance between them. It was more than that. Lisa had always prided herself on being intuitive, and lately, her instincts had been telling her that there was something wrong. She had caught him on his phone too many times to ignore it. Text messages that were quickly hidden, calls that were cut off before she could even hear the first word. The suspicious glances he exchanged with Emily, the nanny who had become so much more than just someone to watch Sarah, didn't go unnoticed. She had dismissed the growing tension between them at first, telling herself it was nothing. But now, something deep in her gut told her it wasn't just her imagination. She needed to confront him, needed to know what was happening. She just didn't know how to begin. The soft hum of the party buzzed around her, but Lisa felt disconnected from it all. The laughter felt like it was coming from another world. Her eyes lingered on the door leading into the kitchen, hoping to catch a glimpse of Jason. He had been acting strangely for weeks, and she had been pushing the thought away, convincing herself it was just stress. But now, with Sarah's party in full swing, that feeling of unease had blossomed into something much darker. She found herself walking toward the kitchen, hoping to find him there. But as she turned the corner, she froze. Jason was standing with Emily, their heads bent close together. They were speaking in hushed voices, too quietly for Lisa to make out the words. But there was something in their posture that sent a chill down her spine. Emily was smiling, softly, flirtatiously, but it was Jason's expression that made Lisa's heart stop. His eyes were fixed on Emily, the kind of look he used to give her when they first met. That look, the one full of desire, of longing. Lisa's breath caught in her throat. She knew without a doubt now what was happening. The hair on her neck stood on end as she felt the weight of the moment. The pieces clicked together. The late nights, the secretive phone calls, the strange behavior, it was all leading to this. Her husband, the man she trusted with her life, was having an affair with their nanny. Lisa took a slow, steadying breath and forced herself to move forward. She couldn't let them see her just yet. The shock of the discovery rattled her, but she pushed it down. She couldn't let her daughter's birthday be overshadowed by this. Not yet. Not until she had the answers she needed. She stepped back into the crowd, forcing a smile as she greeted another guest, her hands trembling slightly as she held her glass. The laughter around her felt like a distant echo, and all she could think about was confronting Jason, about putting an end to this charade once and for all. But how? The evening carried on as if nothing had changed. The children played games in the yard, shrieking with laughter as the parents chatted in small groups, exchanging pleasantries. Lisa stood in the middle of it all, feeling like a stranger in her own home. She watched Jason laugh at something one of the guests said, his eyes lighting up, his smile so different from the man she'd been living with. The contrast was sharp, painful. She could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on her, suffocating her. But she couldn't act yet. Not here. Not with all of them watching. She needed to plan this carefully, to make sure she could confront him in a way that wouldn't tear apart their lives completely in front of everyone. But as the night wore on, the feeling of being trapped grew heavier. How long could she pretend she didn't know? How long could she stand there and smile, pretending everything was okay when her world was falling apart? The minutes seemed to stretch into hours. Lisa's mind raced with possibilities. She needed answers. She needed him to tell her the truth, and she needed to hear it from his mouth. And she knew, deep down, that the only way to get that truth was to force it out of him. Tonight at Sarah's birthday party, of all places. As the night wore on, Lisa found herself making her way to the back of the house. Her pulse quickened with each step. Jason and Emily had slipped away again, leaving the party behind. The house was eerily quiet, the sound of distant chatter and laughter barely audible. Lisa stepped into the kitchen, her eyes scanning the room. They were in the corner by the sliding door, speaking again, their voices low. She could barely hear them over the party's noise, but she didn't need to. She had already heard enough. She cleared her throat, and both Jason and Emily looked up, their faces going pale the moment they saw her. The world seemed to stop. "I know," Lisa said, her voice a cold whisper, cutting through the tension. The words hung in the air like a knife, and she could see the panic flash in Jason's eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, but she held up her hand, silencing him. "You don't get to explain this away. Not now. Not here." The quiet that followed was suffocating. Lisa's eyes locked with Jason's, and in that moment, all the years of trust, love, and devotion to this man seemed to vanish. The man she thought she knew, the father of her children, was nothing more than a stranger standing before her. And then, with a trembling breath, she asked the question that would change everything. "How long, Jason?" Jason stood frozen, eyes wide, lips parted in a silent plea for mercy. He didn't move as Lisa's gaze pinned him to the spot, her silence like a blade slicing through the space between them. He was trying to speak, trying to explain. She could see it in the way his mouth worked, but the words would never come. The truth hung there, thick and suffocating, and nothing he said would change that. "Lisa." His voice was raw, barely audible. She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped closer, her presence commanding and sharp. The sound of laughter from the party outside felt so far away, like it belonged to another world. She was no longer part of that world. Not after everything she had just discovered. "You think I'm going to fall for this again?" Her voice was low, but every word cut through the tension like a blade. She wasn't angry. Anger was too simple, too clean. What she felt now was deeper, more destructive. It was something like betrayal and grief fused together, a weight pressing down on her chest that made her throat tighten. Jason flinched, a nervous glance darting toward Emily before quickly flicking back to Lisa. His hand trembled as he reached out, as if testing the air between them, his fingers twitching helplessly before falling back to his side. "I didn't want this, Lisa," he said, his voice cracking, but the words felt hollow. The act of speaking them didn't match the movements of his body. His hand, still tense, brushed against Emily's arm in a gesture that Lisa had once found endearing. The same hand that had held hers in front of their friends, the same one that had caressed her skin in the moments when they were still in love. "I didn't want to hurt you," Jason repeated, but the words rang empty, like an echo of something he used to believe. His mouth said one thing, but his body, his touch on Emily, betrayed him. Lisa's chest tightened, and for a moment, she couldn't breathe. She could hear Jason's voice in her ears, but her focus had shifted, fixating on the movement of his hand. His thumb stroked the edge of Emily's arm, slowly, absent-mindedly, as though she weren't standing right there watching. Each subtle motion, a caress, a tender touch, told her everything she needed to know. The words had long since lost meaning. She inhaled sharply, her fingers curling into tight fists at her sides, nails digging into her palms. The anger didn't come in a rush. It seeped into her body, tight and suffocating, until she felt the hot pulse of it behind her eyes, threatening to spill over. Her pulse thrummed in her ears, but she kept her voice steady, controlled. "Really?" she asked, each syllable measured, like she was tasting each word before speaking it. "Is that how you didn't want to hurt me? By touching her like that? By lying to my face for months?" Jason's face flickered with the faintest trace of guilt before it was quickly masked by desperation. He took a step forward, hands now outstretched, as if trying to bridge the gap between them. But Lisa didn't move. She stayed rooted, unwilling to let him close the distance. His voice was soft, pleading, but it didn't reach her. "Please, Lisa, I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen." Lisa closed her eyes for a split second, then opened them, focusing on the small space between them. She felt herself disconnecting, a part of her pulling away from the man she had once known, once trusted, so completely. She glanced at Emily, who was now looking anywhere but at her, shifting uncomfortably under the weight of her own guilt. Lisa's eyes narrowed slightly. There was no regret on Emily's face. No apology, just a nervous shuffle of feet as she avoided direct eye contact. Jason, still standing before her, was barely holding himself together. His face, once full of confidence, was now gaunt, stricken with a look of helplessness. But it wasn't enough to sway Lisa. His body language, the way his hands twitched, betrayed the lie of his remorse. "I never wanted to hurt you," he repeated, but his voice quivered. Lisa could feel her jaw tighten as she listened. His words were a mockery now, as absurd as the tender brush of his fingers against Emily's skin. He was so desperate to salvage something, anything, but the cracks in his facade were widening. "Is that so?" she murmured, her voice ice-cold, the faintest tremor in her hands as she reached for her phone. She didn't know what she expected, didn't know why she was still giving him the chance to speak. Perhaps, a part of her had hoped, no, believed, that there was still a shred of the man she had married beneath the lies. But the man before her wasn't him anymore. Her fingers moved quickly, sending a message to Kate without even thinking. "I need you. It's happening. I can't do this alone." Jason saw the phone screen light up with the message and knew exactly what it meant. Lisa had reached the end of her rope. He opened his mouth to say something, anything, but there were no words left. Not now. Not when the truth was exposed, raw and open before them. The silence between them stretched long and thick. Every second felt like a weight pulling her deeper into the cold depths of what this moment truly meant. Jason wasn't even trying to defend himself anymore. His gaze had dropped to the floor, the weight of his guilt hanging heavy in the air. Emily, too, was suddenly smaller in the space between them, her shoulders hunched, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. Lisa's fingers trembled as she set the phone down, her body tight with a strange, quiet fury. She turned to the door, trying to steady herself, but her thoughts were spinning. Her pulse was hammering in her ears, her breath shallow and jagged. She had been living a lie for too long, and now she would be the one to take control of it. At that moment, the doorbell rang, sharp and insistent, breaking through the tension in a way that felt almost too timely. Emily flinched, and Lisa could see her face drain of color. This wasn't over. Not yet. Without a word, Lisa walked toward the door. Kate would be there any moment. She wouldn't face this alone. Jason's voice, trembling with regret, followed her down the hall, but she didn't turn around. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, Lisa. I swear to you But the door was already opening. Kate stood on the other side, her eyes flicking quickly between Lisa and the tension thick in the room behind her. What's going on? Kate asked, her voice soft but laced with urgency. She stepped inside without waiting for an answer. Lisa didn't speak, just gestured toward the kitchen, where Jason and Emily stood. It didn't need to be said. The truth was all too evident now. And as Lisa's sister stepped into the room, her gaze falling on the scene before her, Lisa felt the weight of everything. Everything she had kept inside, shift, break free, and crumble to the ground. There was no turning back. Not anymore. The silence in the room felt suffocating. Lisa barely noticed Kate entering, her focus entirely consumed by the shifting tension in the air. She had asked the question, had forced the truth out, but now that it was here, she wasn't sure she could handle it. Jason, standing in front of her, seemed to collapse in on himself, a man broken not by remorse, but by the weight of his own failure. Emily, just behind him, was still trying to shrink into the background, as if somehow disappearing might absolve her of the mess she had helped create. Lisa's eyes were burning with the need to say something, anything, but the words stuck in her throat. Kate glanced between them, her eyes narrowing as she took in the scene. Her gaze softened as it landed on Lisa, but only for a moment before hardening again as she turned to Jason. You've really done it this time, haven't you? Jason didn't respond right away. His eyes darted to the floor, his fingers twitching at his sides, like he couldn't quite figure out what to do with them. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. It was as though his own shame had turned his voice to dust. Lisa's hands clenched at her sides, and she forced herself to take a breath. She wasn't going to stand here, watching him fall apart in front of her, while everything she'd worked for, everything she had believed in, unraveled before her eyes. Her pulse thudded in her ears, the sound almost overwhelming. What had she expected? His apology? More lies? She couldn't make herself care anymore. Not after seeing the way he had looked at Emily earlier, the tenderness, the intimacy of it. It was as if she had never existed. I didn't want this, Jason's voice cracked, finally breaking the stillness. But Lisa couldn't bring herself to look at him. She couldn't listen to his excuses anymore. Every word was just another attempt to shift the blame, to soften what he had done. And yet here we are, Lisa said, the coldness in her voice unmistakable. You've taken everything, Jason. And for what? For her. She could barely look at him now, disgust rising in her chest. You let it happen, and you didn't even have the decency to be honest about it. Kate stepped closer, her presence a shield between them. Her eyes were hard now, an edge to her voice that wasn't there before. Enough of this, she said, and Lisa could hear the tension in her words. Jason, you owe her more than this. You don't get to hide anymore. Jason's mouth opened and closed, as though searching for the words that would undo the damage. But there was nothing. No amount of pleading could bring back the trust he had shattered. Lisa's chest tightened. Every word he said, every word that came out of his mouth, felt like it was another piece of her heart being crushed underfoot. She had trusted him, loved him, and he had betrayed her, not just once, but over and over. All for this, for Emily. Her gaze flicked to Emily, standing by the door now, her hands clasped in front of her as though she were trying to make herself invisible. The guilt on her face was palpable, but there was something else, too. Something Lisa couldn't quite place. Emily's lips trembled, and her eyes flickered from Jason to the ground, not daring to meet anyone's gaze. Her body language was small, defensive, but there was an undercurrent of something darker. She wasn't just scared. She was avoiding the truth, the weight of what had happened. I never meant for this to. Emily's voice faltered, her eyes welling with tears that she refused to let fall. She shifted uncomfortably, her movements jerky, as if she were fighting the urge to run. The soft whimper she tried to stifle was almost too much for Lisa to bear. You never meant for this to happen? Lisa's voice was cutting, a sharp edge to it that startled even her. You think that's going to fix anything? You didn't just walk into this. You chose it, Emily. Every step you took. And now, you're pretending it's all some mistake. Emily's breath hitched as she flinched at the harshness of Lisa's words. Her face flushed with shame, and she turned slightly away, as though she could disappear into the shadows. But Lisa saw the tightness in her jaw, the way her shoulders hunched as though she were trying to make herself smaller. The tears that welled in her eyes didn't fall. They just hung there, unresolved, as if Emily herself didn't know how to process what she had done. Lisa could almost feel the weight of her guilt. There was no real remorse in her expression, just an awkward, painful awareness that nothing would be the same after this. Lisa's heart was pounding now. She could feel it in her throat, the pressure building up, threatening to choke her. She wanted to say more, to lash out at both of them for what they had done. But something deeper kept her still. Something more painful than anger. There was no point in speaking. They both knew the truth, and words would never undo the damage. And then, without another word, Emily turned toward the door, her back to Lisa as she took a few hesitant steps away. Her footsteps were almost inaudible, a soft scuff on the hardwood floor, but each one felt like a hammer to Lisa's chest. Emily was leaving, fleeing the wreckage she had helped create. Lisa watched her, her body tensing with every movement. There was no fight in Emily, no attempt to explain herself, to make some half-hearted apology. Instead, she seemed to withdraw further, as if the space between them could somehow shield her from the consequences of what she had done. Her hands were shaking, her breath quickening, but she didn't stop. She didn't turn back. Her lips parted, and Lisa heard her whisper, barely audible. I'm sorry, but it was empty. No real conviction. No remorse. Emily had already decided to leave, to put distance between herself and the fallout. It wasn't a true apology, it was just a word that meant nothing now. Lisa felt the bitterness of it, like acid on her tongue. She wanted to shout, to tell Emily that it didn't matter, that nothing would change now. But instead, she stood there, frozen. She was done. She turned her gaze to Jason, her heart heavy in her chest. Get out. I don't want to see you again. Either of you. For a moment, Jason didn't move. His mouth opened, but he couldn't find any more excuses. The room felt too small, too suffocating with his presence there. But he didn't argue. He couldn't. With a final, defeated look, Jason turned and followed Emily out, his footsteps echoing in the silence that followed. The door clicked shut behind them, leaving Lisa standing alone, her heart hollowed out. The air in the room was thick, suffocating. The world outside seemed to continue, the muffled sounds of Sarah's laughter still drifting in from the backyard. But Lisa couldn't bring herself to join that world. It was as if it no longer belonged to her. She walked slowly into the kitchen, her legs feeling heavy, as if each step was harder than the last. The weight of everything, of the truth she had uncovered, of the choices she had made, pressed down on her. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of the haze of her thoughts. She reached for it automatically, her fingers still trembling slightly. The screen lit up with a message from Kate. You okay? Lisa stared at the words for a moment, her heart aching. The tears she had been holding back now threatened to spill over. But no, not yet. Not now. There were too many pieces left to figure out. Too much still broken. The storm wasn't over. It was only just beginning. And she wasn't sure she was ready for what was coming next. The silence that hung in the house felt suffocating, like the air had thickened, pressing in on Lisa's chest. The echoes of the party, the sounds of laughter, were a distant memory now, replaced by the hum of a stillness that seemed to crawl into every corner. It was as if the walls themselves had witnessed everything, and now they were closing in around her. Lisa sat on the edge of the kitchen counter, her fingers digging into the cold granite, the rough surface grounding her in a reality she wasn't ready to face. She hadn't moved since the door had clicked shut behind Emily and Jason, but her mind had been in constant motion, reeling from the weight of what had just happened. There was no escape from the crushing heaviness of it. Kate had followed her into the kitchen, but Lisa barely registered the sound of her sister's footsteps. Her head throbbed, a dull, persistent ache that mirrored the emptiness in her chest. She hadn't realized how much of herself she had invested in Jason, in their life together, until it all came crashing down. Kate's voice broke through the fog of her thoughts, cutting through the thick tension. "You need to breathe, Lisa." Lisa's gaze flickered toward her sister, her body still stiff. Kate stood there, arms crossed, her posture exuding a controlled calm that Lisa couldn't seem to replicate. Kate had always been the practical one, the one who could keep it together when everything else fell apart. But now, as she stood there, she wasn't just the supportive older sister. There was something else in her eyes, a spark of frustration, of sharp understanding that Lisa wasn't sure she was ready for. "You don't get it, Kate," Lisa said, her voice rough. She wasn't sure if she was speaking to her sister or to herself. "I don't know how to move forward from this. It's not just about Jason. It's about everything. The way we built this life, and now it's shattered." Her hands shook slightly as she gripped the edge of the counter, trying to steady herself. Kate stepped forward, her eyes softening for a moment, but then hardening again, as if she was trying to hold back something she knew would push her sister further. "You don't need to figure it all out right now. Just stop. Just breathe." Her voice was steady, but there was an urgency to it. Kate moved closer, laying a hand on Lisa's shoulder, a solid presence in the midst of the chaos. Lisa closed her eyes, taking a slow, deliberate breath. The scent of coffee, stale air, and the faint, sharp tang of cleaning supplies filled her nostrils. It was a strange contrast to the turmoil in her chest. She wanted to break, to crumble, but she couldn't. She had already been through too much. She had to find a way to push forward, to take control of the situation, even if she didn't know how. Kate's hand tightened briefly on her shoulder, grounding her. "You have more strength than you give yourself credit for. You're not the one who's broken here." Kate's words were quiet, but Lisa could feel the weight of them settling deep inside her. But Lisa shook her head, the movement sharp and defiant. "I don't know who I am anymore, Kate. This life I thought I had, everything I believed in, it's gone." Her voice broke on the last word, and for the first time since it all started, the tears she'd been holding back spilled over. She couldn't help it. The weight of everything, the betrayal, the confusion, the loss, was too much to keep inside any longer. But even as the tears fell, she didn't feel relief. It was just more weight, more pressure, a flood she couldn't control. Kate didn't let go of her, but she didn't speak. She just held her, her presence warm, steady. The room around them was so still, so quiet that Lisa could hear the sound of her own breathing, the sharp, uneven inhales that made her feel like she was drowning. Eventually, Kate pulled back slightly, just enough to look at her, her brow furrowed. "You can't let them make you doubt yourself. Jason's gone, but you're still here." Lisa wiped her eyes, taking another deep breath. The numbness was starting to fade, but it left behind a rawness that she wasn't sure how to deal with. "He's gone, yes, but Emily, she doesn't get to walk away from this either. She made a choice. She made a choice to be a part of it. And now she's gone too." Kate's expression hardened, her lips pressing together into a thin line. "You're right. She's not innocent in this. She knew exactly what she was doing." Kate paused, then added in a quieter voice, "But she's not the only one who's left you." Lisa's head snapped up at her sister's words, a sharp, confused look in her eyes. Kate didn't back away, but her gaze softened, as if she was seeing something Lisa couldn't yet recognize. "You're still here, Lisa," Kate repeated, her voice steady, but with a slight catch. "You're not broken. You don't have to fix anything. You can walk away from this, too. The weight of Kate's words settled over Lisa like a heavy blanket. She had always been the one to keep the family together, the one who had worked tirelessly to protect the life she had built with Jason. But now, as she stood here in the wreckage of it all, she realized that maybe it was time to stop fixing things. Maybe it was time to let go. I don't know what to do, Lisa whispered, more to herself than to Kate. She could feel the uncertainty rising in her chest, bubbling up like a tidal wave that threatened to drown her again. She wanted answers. She wanted to fix this. She wanted to know how to feel whole again. Kate's eyes softened, and she reached out again, this time placing her hand on Lisa's arm, grounding her once more. You don't need to know right now, but you will. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for. A long silence stretched between them, but this time it was different. There was no expectation to fill the space with words. Just the quiet of the house and the soft ticking of the clock on the wall, marking the minutes passing in a world that had already shifted beneath Lisa's feet. Lisa's gaze turned toward the window. The street outside was quiet, empty, bathed in the soft glow of the streetlights. Jason was long gone, his figure swallowed by the darkness. Emily had slipped away into her own world, leaving behind only the echoes of her choices. And now, Lisa was left to make her own decision, to choose whether she would follow the path of anger and revenge, or if she would take a different road, one she didn't yet understand. The phone on the counter buzzed again. She hesitated, not sure if she was ready for another message, another conversation that might pull her back into the chaos. She reached for it slowly, almost reluctantly, and saw a message from Ben. Do you want me to come over? Lisa stared at the message for a long moment. She felt the weight of it, the question that seemed to hang in the air between her and the reality she couldn't escape. Maybe Ben wasn't the answer she was looking for. Maybe the only person she needed to lean on right now was herself. She turned to Kate, who was watching her closely, waiting for her to make the next move. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Lisa felt like she might actually be able to breathe. No, she said quietly, her voice steadying. I need to be alone. For now. Kate nodded, giving her sister a small, reassuring smile. I'll be right here, whenever you're ready. Lisa let out a slow breath, feeling the tiniest bit of weight lift from her shoulders. There was no easy way forward, but she knew she couldn't go back. She had to move forward. The house felt too big now, too quiet. The space around Lisa seemed vast, yet somehow suffocating at the same time. She stood by the window, watching the faint glow of the streetlights, but the view did little to calm her restless mind. The familiar sounds of the city, cars passing, people chatting in the distance, seemed distant and muffled, as though she were trapped in a soundproof room. Everything felt like it was closing in on her, even though the walls hadn't moved. She hadn't even realized how stiff her body had become, until the ache in her neck made her wince. Her hand, still resting on the windowsill, felt cold, but she couldn't bring herself to move it. Her thoughts raced in a dozen directions at once. The conversation with David had left her with more questions than answers. Betrayal. She thought she understood it, but this was something else entirely. Power. Control. Jason hadn't just been unfaithful. He'd been weaving a web, entangling everyone around him, herself included. The floorboards creaked behind her, and she turned sharply. A moment later, David stepped into the room, his eyes downcast, his shoulders tense. He wasn't looking at her, but she could feel the weight of his presence pressing on her, filling the space. I shouldn't have come here, David said, his voice rough, as if he'd been rehearsing these words in his head for too long. But I couldn't leave it like this. Not with you not knowing. Lisa felt her pulse quicken, her chest tightening again as the gravity of his words settled. The reality of what he was saying began to sink in, slow and relentless, as if every part of her brain were resisting the truth. David, though visibly uncomfortable, seemed more certain than he had ever been. But what was his angle? What did he stand to gain by telling her now? You knew, Lisa said, her voice coming out sharper than she intended. Her mind struggled to keep up, to make sense of everything. The confusion, the betrayal, the pieces David had dropped into her lap. None of it added up. David shifted his weight, his eyes darting briefly to the floor. I didn't want to get involved, but when I found out, it wasn't just about Jason and Emily anymore. I couldn't keep quiet. Not when you deserve to know everything. He hesitated, swallowing hard. You think Jason's been lying to you about his feelings for Emily. You think it's just a love affair. But it's not. There's more. Much more. The words hit her harder than she expected. Her body stiffened, and she felt a rush of heat surge to her face. What else could there be? The affair was bad enough. But this? Something in David's demeanor made her pulse quicken with a mix of dread and curiosity. I don't understand, Lisa said, her voice tight, trying to process. What do you mean, more? David glanced at her, his eyes filled with something akin to regret, but also a trace of something else. Jason was involved in something. Business deals, arrangements with Emily. They weren't just sleeping together. They were building something big. Jason was using her to get ahead in ways you couldn't even imagine. Lisa blinked, trying to grasp the gravity of his words, but the pieces just wouldn't fit together. You're saying it was more than just an affair? What kind of deals? What's all this about? David took a breath, his voice softening. Jason was in too deep with some people at his work. He thought he could control it, thought he could handle it, but he got greedy, and Emily was part of the plan. She was involved in decisions, business, things you wouldn't believe. And when I found out, I couldn't just ignore it anymore. I should have told you sooner, but I didn't want to be the one to break it to you. Lisa's head spun. Control, greed, power. The words David was using felt so out of place, so much larger than the simple betrayal she had assumed. She was looking at David now, not with the sympathy she might have expected to feel, but with sharp, focused clarity. He was here because he knew too much, and now he was laying it all at her feet, expecting her to understand, to act on it. I don't get it, Lisa said, pressing her palms against her forehead. Why now? Why tell me this at all? David shifted uneasily. Because if you don't know the full truth, you can't make a decision. You'll keep thinking this is all just about him cheating on you, just about broken trust. But this, he gestured vaguely. This goes deeper. It's about power, about something you can't control. You deserve to know what he's been hiding from you. I couldn't leave you in the dark anymore. Not when I knew what kind of man Jason really was. Lisa felt a chill spread down her spine, but the tension in her muscles didn't ease. Instead, it became more pronounced, more urgent. She wasn't sure what to do with the truth. She wasn't even sure if she wanted it. But here it was, laid bare before her, and she had to make a choice. The weight of it pressed on her chest, suffocating. David, she started, her voice barely audible. You're telling me Jason's been using me all along? For power, for business. She didn't wait for an answer, her breath coming faster now. This whole thing, his affair with Emily, it was all just a small part of it? David opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out at first. He paused, gathering himself, and then nodded. Yes, it was always more than what you thought. And now you have to decide what to do with it. You can't keep letting him walk away from all of this, pretending like he didn't destroy everything. Lisa's chest tightened further, and her fingers curled into fists. This wasn't just a betrayal of trust anymore. This wasn't a lover's quarrel or a fleeting affair. This was manipulation, deceit on a scale she hadn't even begun to fathom. It was a game, and Jason had played her like a pawn. For a moment, all she could hear was the pounding of her heart, the rush of blood in her ears. She stood still, eyes unfocused, trying to process it all. The room felt like it was closing in on her, but she forced herself to take a breath, to push the panic back. She couldn't let herself fall apart now, not when she had a choice to make. The phone on the counter buzzed, but she didn't move to grab it. She felt no desire to check it. It was a distraction. She wasn't looking for more confusion. Not now. Her hands felt clammy, the air thick with a suffocating sense of finality. David, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. I can't just accept this. I need to think. I need to figure out what to do. David nodded, backing away slowly, his face still filled with an unsettling mixture of remorse and resolve. I'm sorry, but you needed to know. You deserve that much. He turned and walked toward the door, his footsteps heavy on the floorboards. As he left, Lisa's gaze flicked toward the window, but her mind was elsewhere. The silence in the room enveloped her once more. Only now, it felt different. The weight of her choices hung over her, casting a shadow on everything she had once believed to be true. She was alone again, and yet, she wasn't. The walls of her world had shifted, and now, there was only one thing she knew for sure. She couldn't stay where she was. She had to decide who she was going to be from here on out. The quiet hum of the phone buzzed again, a reminder that things would never be the same. But in that moment, Lisa had no answers, no clear path forward. She could feel the space between the life she'd known and the one she had to create for herself. The choice was hers now, and it was the hardest decision she had ever faced. But she had to make it, and she would. The house felt different now. No longer a place of comfort or warmth, it had become a strange, hollow shell, the walls echoing with the remnants of a life that no longer fit. Lisa stood by the window, gazing out at the quiet street. The night was still, the occasional flicker of a passing car's headlights the only sign of movement. It felt almost like the world had slowed down, waiting for her to decide what came next. Her phone buzzed once more, but she ignored it. Her fingers itched to check, but she didn't need another message from Kate. She knew what it would say, "I'm here if you need me." But Lisa didn't need anyone right now. She had spent so much of her life relying on the comfort of others, leaning on them for stability, but that wasn't going to work anymore. Not with everything she had learned, not with the way her life had unraveled. It wasn't about fighting the pain anymore. It was about accepting it, standing in it, and figuring out what she was going to do with it. The decision was hers and hers alone. Kate's offer to help felt too much like a safety net she wasn't ready to accept. She had learned something in the last few days, something about herself. The woman she had been, the one who always kept her family's needs in front of her own, the one who lived in the shadows of her relationships, was gone. The woman standing here now was someone who had to find her own footing, someone who couldn't rely on others to tell her what was best. Lisa's fingers clenched around the phone, her mind grappling with the weight of her own thoughts. She thought about calling Kate back, about leaning on her sister's steady presence, but a part of her recoiled. There was a strength she had yet to tap into, and she couldn't let herself be pulled back into the orbit of her old life. Not when everything she had believed was being stripped away. She pressed her palm against the window, the coolness of the glass seeping through her skin. She closed her eyes and let the silence settle in her chest. It was a deep silence, one that wasn't threatening, but liberating. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't overwhelmed. She was just present. Her thoughts turned to what came next. She couldn't go back to the life she had before. That life, the one built on illusions of trust and stability, was gone. But something had shifted inside her. She wasn't sure what, but she knew it was real. There was a quiet certainty within her now, one that had taken root after the chaos of the past few days. "I'll be all right," she murmured, almost as though speaking to herself. She had no idea what the future held, but she wasn't afraid anymore. There was a new sense of possibility in the air, even if she couldn't see it clearly yet. She wasn't sure where her path would lead, but for the first time, she knew it was hers to walk. Lisa set the phone down on the counter and made her way toward the small bookshelf near the corner of the living room. She hadn't even noticed how much dust had gathered on the spines of the books until now. There was a book she had been meaning to read for years, something about rediscovering yourself after loss. She smiled softly to herself, running her fingers across its cover before pulling it from the shelf. That was what she was doing now, rediscovering herself. Her mind wandered again, this time to the future, to a life that wasn't defined by Jason, by Emily, or by anyone else's expectations. She thought about moving, not immediately, She couldn't afford that kind of change all at once, but eventually, maybe she'd take up painting again. She'd always wanted to, but her old life had crowded out the space for her to create. Maybe she'd start traveling, see places she'd only heard about in passing conversations. Maybe she would meet people who didn't carry the weight of her past with them. The phone buzzed again, more insistent this time. But this time she didn't hesitate. Lisa picked it up, her thumb pausing over the screen for just a moment. She hadn't been ready before, but she was now. She typed the words with deliberate calm, letting them settle on the screen before hitting send. "I appreciate it, Kate, but this is something I have to do on my own." She set the phone down again, and this time, the weight in her chest felt lighter, as though a burden had shifted. It wasn't about rejecting Kate or anyone else's help. It was about taking control. It was about walking forward without relying on someone to hold her hand. And then, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, she smiled. It was small, but it was real. She felt it deep inside, not just on her lips, but in her chest. It wasn't a smile of relief or of surrender. It was a smile of possibility, of hope, of a future she was finally ready to claim. She turned away from the window and headed for the kitchen. She would make herself a cup of tea, just something simple to ground her in the moment. She moved with purpose now, each step solid beneath her. The house no longer felt like a prison. It was just a place. And in that place, she was going to start anew. The next morning, Lisa would wake up, like she had done countless mornings before. But it wouldn't be the same. Not anymore. There was no grand gesture, no dramatic conclusion to her story. But there was something more powerful than that. A quiet, unstoppable resolve. She had faced the hardest decision of her life, and while she might not know exactly what the future held, she was ready to find out. Lisa glanced out the window one last time before walking into the kitchen. The street outside was still, but the day ahead was hers. She wasn't defined by the pain of the past. She wasn't defined by anyone's mistakes or betrayal. She was Lisa, and she was finally free to live for herself. The world was waiting, and for the first time, she felt like she could meet it on her own terms. And that, she realized, was enough.